All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Patrick. I'm so excited to talk a little bit about how folks are using AI in state legislatures. We are going to get started in just a few minutes, but before we get going, wanted to first say over on the right-hand side of your screen in the Docs tab, we have a couple opportunities for you to continue to engage on the subject of AI. So first off is Wonk Nation, which is our Slack community. We have a little over 500 public affairs pros in there. We're talking all things, how folks are using AI, how folks are, tackling the challenges of the day in public affairs. And we also have an opportunity to check out Quorum State, where you can learn a little bit more on what state offering Quorum has to bring to the table. And then lastly, is a link to join our AI Inner Circle, which is a small group of public affairs pros who want to tackle today's problems using AI. So we come together to share a little bit more about how each other is using Quorum AI tools, but also what other tools are on the market. And what else are folks using like ChatGPT or Perplexity and things like that in order to handle the challenges of the day. So if you're interested in any of those three things, either joining Wonk Nation, which is a Slack community, checking out Quorum State, or joining the AI Inner Circle, you can go on the right-hand side of your screen under the Docs tab to click and learn more there. I'd also love to open up a quick poll for everybody, which is, we'd love for you to share your or to rate your AI abilities. So are you an AI expert? Are you feeling pretty confident? Not so confident? Don't use it. On the right-hand side of your screen under polls, you can let us know how you're feeling there. All right, so I'm seeing a lot of folks are saying I'm pretty confident. Some saying not so confident, or that they don't use it. All right, so most folks are saying feeling pretty confident. We got a couple AI experts in here as well. Yeah, you can be an AI expert and not use it if you're more in the research and application of AI in policy. All right, great stuff. Now, Molly and I had a bet on the last webinar that we'd at least have people joining in from 20 different states. And we had about 25 different states on the last webinar. I'd love to know where we're at today. So in the chat, please share where you're joining us from. All right, I'm seeing Molly's in Michigan, Daniel in Ohio, Melissa in Maine. Maine's not one I think we've gotten before, so that's exciting. Joy in New York City, Joshua in California, seen a couple folks from California. Also shouting out people who are thrown in cities too. New York City, from what I've heard from folks who live upstate, is a different state. PA, Nevada. I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania myself. All right, very cool. We're definitely gonna get more than 20 on this one. All right. It looks like senators having a tough time joining us. Or having a hard time, or we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. So in the meantime, I'm going to share a little bit more about Quorum's AI capabilities. So we launched Copilot a couple years back, which is a tool which is your superpower for state legislative affairs and legislative affairs across your entire organization. So that's looking and finding and summarizing policy. That's creating talking points. That's all that kind of fun stuff that you're needing to do day to day to help to streamline your workflows and get more out of it. We had a couple of folks join last week, so if you use whatever link you used to join this webinar or to sign up for this one, you can go and see how some folks are utilizing AI, and also a bit more of a deep dive that I gave 2 weeks ago on Quorum Copilot. All right, it looks like the senator was able to join now. We got over our little technical difficulties, so I'll go ahead and add him to the stage. All right.
Hey, how's it going?
Thank you so much for joining us, Senator.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. Who knew the Wi-Fi in our Capitol building was going to get all weird on us?
All good, all good. My favorite experiences were going up to the going up to the Hill, at least in Capitol Hill, as there's a couple of rooms that are just like total dead zones for Wi-Fi and data, and I'm always like panicky, like that's when my boss is going to reach out. Of like that's when.
So the first rule of using AI as a legislator is make sure your building will let you use AI.
Right, exactly. All right, well, Senator, do you mind introducing yourself for everyone?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Schuyler VanValkenburg. I'm a state senator in Virginia. I represent Western Henrico County, which is a suburb right outside of the city, where I also am a teacher. I teach government at a high school in Henrico County Public Schools. We are a part-time legislature, so we meet 2 months of the year, and we really do more than that, but that's when we're full-time. And so I've been in the legislature for 8 years now, 2 in the Senate, and before that I did serve 3 terms in the House of Delegates. Also representing part of Western Henrico County. And so really glad to be here.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. And you have such a unique perspective, one being a legislator, but also being an educator as well, which is also a huge application for AI, whether we like it or not, for how some of the students are using it. So
yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's actually, I think, probably a bigger issue on the education side than it is on the legislative side at the moment.
A good bit. All right. So the first question is just how AI is being used in the legislature. So first off, like, what is your personal philosophy on using AI as a legislator?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think if you had asked me that question a year ago, I would have said I don't have one, and I would have, I hadn't really kind of, I think, fully thought it through. Not because we didn't use it. I think mostly because. It just wasn't as kind of integral and wasn't being talked about as much in policy as it is now. I think my kind of personal philosophy on it is I don't want us to depend on it for anything, but I want us to use it as a tool where we can make our efforts stronger, better, more efficient. And I think what I mean by that is, AI can be a great tool for like constituent outreach. It can be a great tool for data gathering. It can be a great tool for gathering policy research. I'm doing a lot of stuff on housing these days, and so you can kind of like quickly type in, what states have done X, but not depending on it, right? Like, this is kind of, it's like there's the famous examples of the lawyers who wrote their briefs with AI, and it gave them fake court cases that the judge found out, right? So it's like trust but verify type of thing, but also to put in your own voice. I mean, I think as a politician, and this is true as an educator too, but like as a politician, like your voice is really important, and how you talk to constituents and how you do things. So I think at least for right now in our office, the way we use it is a kind of a tool that we can maybe help make ourselves more efficient and able to do more. But at the end of the day, there's still this like human layer on top of all of it. That it all is going to have eyeballs on it, right? So like if it's for like a concrete example, right? If it's hey, we're getting all these constituent outreach about issue X, and we don't have anything that we've really meaningfully written about topic X. We can start by inputting something into AI, getting an outline, like a lot of people do for emails at work or memos or something like that, and then we can look and see what it did and go through it and put our voice on it and Virginia details and all that type of stuff.
Right. That's fantastic. So just so everybody knows, on the right-hand side of your screen, there's also a Q&A tab if you want to ask any questions yourself to the senator. I'm curious, though, piggybacking off what you said, is there anything where you would say, like, do not use it for this? Or, like, is there anything you're like, that's a line?
Yeah, I think that answer has changed in the last year, too, a little bit. Yeah. I think I'm a little bit more inclined to use it for research than I used to be. So, for example, like to use the housing example again, we know that one of the reasons why we don't build houses is because of regulations and, veto points along the way that really stop building from being done. And I think, if you had said a year ago, would you use AI to start the process of building out all those places and all those chokeholds? I probably would have said no, but I think I'd be more inclined to say yes now, as a starting point, right? As a starting point. I think for me, the no-go is the law making process, right. Writing a law, doing something formal like that. I think is really, is a no-go. Because, every state's legal code, for example, right, has its own language, it has its own lingo, it has its own way of doing things. Words matter so much in lawmaking and how things are drafted, and it tends to be a more communal process anyway. So I think that's a no-go. And I also just think like the having, either you're drafting it or maybe your lawyers are drafting it, right? Having that kind of draft iteration process is really important for like slowing things down and thinking through what you're writing and how you're writing. So I think like the friction and the struggle of drafting a law is vital to it doing what it's supposed to do and also being good. So I think that for me is a no-go. I think there's a lot of constituent outreach for me. That's probably a no-go for. I mean, I think if you're talking about, form emails that you're trying to create and craft and put in your own voice that you're going to be using constantly over the years, I think that's one thing. I think if you're writing to your supporters or you're, writing a kind of a more personal response or something like that, I think to me, that's probably still a no-go. And then I think when you think about research, I think the ultimate no-go on that is not having AI not do it, but making sure you're really getting that human piece on it, because it does miss stuff. I mean, it just does, right? And so making sure that you're going back and checking your work that's not a no-go for the thing itself. It's a no-go for the process of how you use the thing.
Right. If I ever see a rocket ship emoji in a bill, I know, like, oh, that was probably it. That was probably it. Okay. Well, it's so great hearing your perspective, because we hear a lot from other state government affairs pros on how they're using it, and it's a lot of like, okay, how do I save a bunch of time in the day? You and your staff are also very busy. I'm curious, do you have any like expectations for your staff using AI? So not just you as a legislator.
Yeah, no, not really. I think mostly because we're a small staff, right? So this isn't like a congressional staff where you probably do need to have like more formalized rules. If I was in the executive branch and I was the governor, I'd probably need to have more formalized rules, because you can't just get a touch on everybody. But our staff is small enough, and there's enough kind of inner working where it's very rare that one person is just working on something all unto themselves. That I think we have a pretty informal process for that. But I also just kind of, because it's a small staff, we trust all of them, right? That they're using kind of whatever's appropriate for the task at hand. So we don't have any really formalized rules. But I think it's also because too, most of the day-to-day work in a legislative staff is it's constituent work, right? Whether it's outreach or it's casework, or it's staying on top of what's happening in the community. AI can sometimes be good for that, finding things, or it's on the research side, right? Which is, finding out where we need to go look for more. I think actually one place, and our governor in Virginia has talked about this, but I think we've seen it. It was actually a really good New York Times op-ed by Jennifer. Oh gosh, I'm going to forget her name. Paula. She worked for the Obama administration, and then she helped Gavin Newsom fix unemployment insurance during COVID in California. She's this techie Democrat-leaning thinker, and writing about how to use AI for looking at regs, right? When you think about what's redundant, hey, we're making this business do these 10 things. Well, do they really need to do the 7th thing because it's outdated? Because and that's you could use AI in that way to really streamline a lot of things that are hanging fruit that it's a lot harder for your eyes to see. Anyway, that's a little aside, but we're really doing research for policy, or we're doing that kind of constituent outreach. And so I think there's not a tremendous, like, the stakes aren't but so high with how we use AI in our office.
Right. Well, would you have any advice to other folks who, you've talked a little bit about how, some constituent outreach might be, a step too far, or like we're not using it to draft any laws or things like that. But do you have any advice for other legislators, not just in like the Virginia Senate, but across the board, for how they should be thinking and approaching AI?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really think it's about like knowing yourself. I mean, this is the case of so many things with politics, like being true to who you are. So like, I will never have AI write an op-ed for me. I First off, I'm a teacher. I care a lot about writing. So there's just like the whole like teacher side of that I wouldn't feel right by using. But I also just feel like it's really important that if I'm doing something that's like a public facing writing, I think it's incredibly important that it's in my voice and through my thought process. Because even if 9/10 of the language ends up looking a lot like what an AI thing would write, I still had to filter it through how I think. And so I think it's really important to kind of know thyself. There's a lot of legislators that use AI much more heavily than I do for constituent outreach, as an example. They feel more comfortable using it for more things. And for me, that's another place where our office is really kind of it is to be a form of email, the more likely we are to dabble with it. But once it starts to become a personalized thing, or it's an issue that's a little idiosyncratic, right, and it's not the kind of like, healthcare, guns, abortion, right, the topics that you tend to see a lot coming in a lot. And so we already have emails built out, and we already have issue stuff built out. So I tend to not want to use it as much for stuff like that. So I think it's like really knowing yourself and also like your staff capacity too. Because I know state legislators, like the staff capacity is just like all through the roof. And I think, I have 2 full-time staff, and then we have, interns, and that allows us to really stay on top of constituent outreach in a way where I'm a teacher, I have 3 kids, and I'm a legislator who likes to be involved in policy. So I'm really busy. It's really hard for me as a legislator to be on top of the correspondence that comes in on a daily basis. And our staff can handle it though, because we got 2 full-time staff and we have interns year round. But if you're in a legislative office where you're like the only person, it is a great way to help you be more efficient in that work, because you do need to respond to constituents, right? So I think it's like know thyself a little bit, but then it's also know your, how that interfaces with your resources at hand.
For sure. Have you noticed any? You mentioned some folks are using it a bit more, especially on the constituent outreach side. Have you noticed any trends in, like, I don't know, one prior that I had was, okay, maybe some of the younger legislators are going to be using it a good bit more versus folks who like just got off their jitterbug. So I'm curious, is that true? Have you seen like some?
That's a good question. I don't think I have. And I think one reason is just like the offices are so independent, and kind of my aides probably have a better answer to this question than I do. I actually think it's more aide driven though than it is legislator driven. The opposite answer to what I just said is like, don't mindlessly use AI, because that's how you get in trouble, right? Yeah. So like know thyself and know the resources and figure it out, but don't like just like dive in without thinking things through either, because that's how you do get in trouble, right? You send out the AI'd email that doesn't make sense, and your constituents like, what the hell is this? Or you AI an op-ed and it just is right, it backfires on you or something. So I think like you do need to be thoughtful about how you use it. I actually think it is more staff driven though, in a lot of ways. And some of that's how much does the legislator kind of oversee the staff, right? How much leeway do they give them? How comfortable is the staff with writing? I mean, I think kind of one of the biggest divides in legislative offices in Virginia and is like the quality of writing that staff can do. Because I think there's just a lot of, I think this is universally true. So this is not like a kids these days get off my lawn statement, but like, I think just like a lot of young staffers don't have strong writing skills. Don't have strong writing skills, tend to lean more on technology. And so, and then a lot of staffers, like some staffers love the constituent service part. I've always had staffers that enjoy that part. I personally have always tried to create a culture in our office where we do enjoy that and we see value in that. Some offices don't, right? And some offices are more willing to kind of outsource that stuff to AI. And that can be, it can interact with the legislator's priorities, but also with the kind of what the staff thinks. And so I think it really is like staff dependent more than it's legislator dependent. Because I even think like most of the young legislators don't necessarily I don't think many. My like hottest take on AI is that the average person hasn't really thought it through at all.
Yeah, that's one of the
Yeah,
things that, yeah,
I think that pertains to legislators.
hearing that too. One of the things that we talk a lot on in like the marketing world and stuff like that about how folks who are incoming now need an entirely new skill set, essentially. So, like you mentioned, folks who are coming in now aren't as strong of writers. I know I can't spell. Like I've been relying on spell check since I was little,
Yeah.
So like just like these technological changes over time, right? I'm curious, do you anticipate that there's going to be like a new skill set needed for staffers, maybe like 10 years down the road or something?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a new skill set so much as like a rethinking of kind of. I mean, with AI, right? The prompts are so important. How
Right.
you ask how you ask it what to do is so important, and that's a skill that I think is kind of like an old school humanities skill in many
Hmm.
ways, but it's kind of reimagined for a different thing, right? So I don't think it's a new skill. It's just like repurposing the way the way you think critically about a book, or right, the way you try to
Right.
complete your task or something, right? And now it's okay. I'm trying to figure out. I'm using this AI thing because I want to cut through the regulations at DPOR, and I want to see how the regulations at DPOR are stopping people from becoming, name your occupation. And so
Okay.
if you don't ask the question correctly, it's not going to give you the information you need, right? And then you're going to go and either try to craft a law or write a letter to DPOR or do something to try to make change, and you're going to be wrong.
Right.
And it's going to actually like have made you less efficient, not more efficient. And so I think kind of thinking through what you're asking it to do, how you're asking it to do it is going to be incredibly important. And then I think the people who are using it well is going to be that like back end. Yeah, you're almost like an editor in some ways
Mm.
rather than a writer, and thinking through
Right.
how to edit your personality in, or to edit your office's vibes back into it, or whatever it is. And so I think, yeah, and it depends on how much people want to use it too, right? As well. So, but yeah, I think it's more. I don't think it's new skills. I think it's reimagining old ones.
I like that. That's a really good point. You're still doing the research. You're still doing all that, like the mental
Yeah.
work of like digging and finding exactly what you're looking for. I'm curious because like you mentioned at the top, you're both a teacher and a legislator. I'm really curious. How do you see AI changing how students learn about things like civics and policy?
um, yeah, I've got lots of. It's funny. A couple of years ago, I went into session and AI was not a thing, and then 2 months later, I came back to my students and ChatGPT was everywhere, and it was like, "All right, Schuyler, like change your teaching on a dime." I, yeah, I really actually think AI is like one of the biggest challenges we're going to have for K-12 K through higher ed, that
Hmm.
we're going to have maybe ever, more so than computers, more so than cell phones, because
Yeah.
it just makes everything so frictionless. And I think like I think this is the big thing we need to grapple with as a society. And in both of my jobs, making things so frictionless, it just makes it so easy to go ask it to do something, right? So
Right.
like if you're at work, you're like, if it just makes it so easy to go, I don't want to write that email to this person. I don't even like this person. I don't like their job in my company. ChatGPT, write this thing. It
Right.
makes it so frictionless, and education and politics are both all about friction at the end of the
Hmm.
day, right? It's hard to read a book. It's hard to talk about it with other people. It's hard to write about it. It's hard to edit what you wrote. It's hard to internalize a teacher's grade and then try to improve yourself. All that stuff's hard. Nobody wants to do it,
Hmm.
right? Very few
Yeah.
people are internally motivated to do that. Uh, and when you say, well, here's this other thing where you can outsource all of that, it's really kind of dangerous from a perspective of if we're trying to educate kids and teach them how to learn. And so I think in some ways, my classroom's going to get much less technological. The blue book is coming back, baby,
Right.
uh,
Right.
because printed copies of essays is coming back,
Hmm.
because otherwise they can take that essay and they can throw it in ChatGPT and they can give me the highlights. And so I think in some ways AI is going to make us go back to a pre-technological space. Having
Hmm.
said that, the advantage of it, I teach a constitutional competition, and there's a lot of possible, you can utilize it really well. We were talking offline, my kids can get a question about judicial interpretation, and we can like input into it. Give me a list of 10 judicial interpretations of the Constitution, right? And then a chat GPT will give them, living constitutionalism, originalism, textualism, right? It'll list out all of them, and it'll give you like some people with it. And then you could be like, chat GPT, give me an example of Louis Brandeis's living constitutionalism in a court case.
Huh.
And then it can get that.
Yeah.
And then from there, they still got to do the work of reading the court case, right? Of the opinion. But like it can lead them to things so much faster, and that's where it can be really powerful. That's where the frictionlessness is good. You're not bumping your head against hours of crappy Google searches, or you're in the library and you don't know what to do. It's a really good starting point for stuff like that. And so I think teachers are just going to have to be much more thoughtful about how they use technology when they're in a classroom. It's kind of a similar principle, though, as to the stuff we were talking about in the political office, though, right? Right. If you're going to use it, you still need to use it thoughtfully. Right.
Roy in the comments saying, I am so old. I remember when calculators were banned in classrooms. And then Molly, I still have dreams about this. The fear of forgetting your blue book on exam days. That's like in my brain all the time. So that's coming back.
I'm old enough both of those too.
All right. All right. I'd love to know. So like, we still really have a lawmaker on. So I really want to have a quick conversation there. What kind of AI related laws do you think we're going to see coming out of the states? And like, where do you think, like, what should the states' role in be all this? Should the states be leading the way? I'm really curious what your thoughts are there.
I don't know that the states should be leading the way, but I think unfortunately our federal government's such a disaster in the moment that they're going to lead the way. I think like on a lot of this technology stuff, it'd have been great if Congress had been in the game. I've been doing, I've passed data privacy legislation. I've passed social media regulation legislation, all this stuff in the last couple of years. And honestly, like, I'm going to do it here because I think it's going to help people here, but like we should actually want Congress to do that because it would be more effective. But if they're not going to, well, sure, why not? We'll try. I think that's kind of my worldview on AI. Like in an ideal world, Congress actually would set up kind of a regulatory regime that was broadly speaking popular and would states could maybe tweak on the edges, but we mostly have this federal standard. You go back to like the Telecommunications Act in the 20s and 30s, right? That was the foundation for, a lot of the phone world, right? And then, we really don't have like a massive comprehensive law on the internet and technology with a bill like that at the congressional level. And so they should do it. They're not going to do it. I think you're going to see a lot of different types of laws. I think we're already seeing privacy laws. We're already seeing Virginia ran a bill on anti-discrimination, and the governor vetoed that. I'm sure will be coming back. I think you're going to see. We had a law. It hasn't gone anywhere yet. It's kind of caught in our off-season technology commission, but laws around how the state uses it, right? So how state agencies use it, and how state agencies can use it, can't use it, that type of thing. I think I don't think we've seen it yet, or at least I haven't seen it yet. I think we're going to start to see laws around AI in education. In Virginia, we've had the governor through an executive order created model policy for AI, but it's really so early that I think that a lot of that guidance is going to end up being outdated, not because they did anything wrong, just because things have changed and they're going to have to just constantly update it. But I do think, just like you saw states banning cell phones, of which Virginia has done in the classroom, I think you're going to see conversations around AI in that, because AI, if you think cell phones distract kids from learning, I mean, AI AI doesn't distract them. It just makes it so they don't have to do it. And so I think you're going to start to see AI stuff in the classroom. And I imagine you're going to see a lot of consumer protection AI legislation, because of course AI can cut both ways in that space. And so, we had a bill, I think it was last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, around rent and AI, because a lot of your big landlords use AI to help kind of like maximize their rents. And so there was a law. I can't remember off the top of my head if the law was to ban that action or to regulate it. I don't remember off the top of my head. But I think you're going to see a lot of stuff in that space too. And then, obviously the unknown is what DC is going to do. The bill that passed this summer, the original version had a 10-year moratorium that came out. I'm glad that came out. But President Trump's executive orders from I think it was a couple of days ago, maybe it was last week. Yeah, right. Yeah, an hour is a day, and a day is a week, and a week is a year. He was saying, AI is a national security, and they're going to try to streamline the process of data centers and stuff like that. And it just came out, so I don't even know how that's going to impact our ability to act. So that's kind of an unknown too. And then, I think like the final thing I'll say is, you can't talk about AI without talking about what undergirds it, which is massive data centers that suck up a ton of energy. And that has to be part of the conversation, because that infiltrates everything, energy. And so, Virginia is having a very real conversation about data centers. We have a lot of them, and it's caused our energy growth to skyrocket, our load growth to skyrocket. And so, as AI is being used more and more, there's also this conversation about the infrastructure around it, which isn't the sexy stuff, right? But if you don't have data centers, you don't have the AI capacity, and so they go together. But to have the data centers and to have people have energy in their homes and not have brownouts, you have to build energy, and not a lot of people want to do that. Everybody has their energy they hate, and nobody has their energy they love. And so we got an energy problem too.
Right. I can think of some energy I love, like cold brew. I think that counts. Okay, if we had a question around, if you could look like 5-10 years down the road, like what is one thing that you like wish AI could like really help with when it comes to governing? Like what does a really good outcome look like for you?
Yeah, I'm totally all in the tank for the abundance movement, and I think a lot of people, when they think of the abundance movement, they think of building housing, or they think of building energy. And obviously those are big components to the abundance movement. But I think the part that gets talked about the least, but is probably the most important in some ways, is state capacity. Having the capacity to do things and to get things done. And some of that is staff, right? Some of that is a department being understaffed, right? A locality not hiring enough people, so some of it is people, but some of it is the stuff that gets in the way of the government acting, or just the limitations of manpower to getting something done. And AI can help with both of those. AI can help, I think if it's used well, rather than taking away jobs, it can help actually accentuate the workers' work. My name's John Doe. I'm on a high-speed transit project, and we want to get this high-speed transit from, we could use the California one. That's the one everyone uses, right? We want to get that high-speed rail in California built, and I can use AI to help like speed along all the stuff I have to do to get the approval to get it built. But then also you can use AI to kind of cut through and say, okay, hey, we're doing this 10-mile section, and there's like 50 permits we need. Well, why do we need 50 permits, right? Why do we have these choke points here? Some of them probably make sense and are necessary, and then some of them probably aren't. We don't need to do these things. Can we get rid of them, right? And I think AI can help us kind of get rid of the underbrush of government that isn't necessary. And that's to that op-ed I was talking about in the New York Times. I mean, that was Jennifer and she had a co-author whose name I'm blanking on. That was one of their big points is you can really use it to kind of help speed up government in a good way, not in like a just speed for speed's sake. And so I think like that to me is where I would really like to see AI be successful, is state capacity. Because I just think when you think about things, when we wonder why government can't do things, oftentimes it's the state capacity issue, which is employee manpower and what they're able to do within the confines of their time. And then it's also like, okay, well, they have X amount of time, but and the things are, do they really need to do everything that they're currently having to do?
Right.
So I think AI can help with all of that.
Yeah. I think there's a lot that you can do. I've saved a lot of time, just by saying, hey, here's the process. What do I do? Like, can you give me advice, things like that. Well, thank you so much for providing a perspective. This is so incredibly helpful, of having an actual legislator's perspective on all these things. And we did get a couple of great questions in through the Q&A. So first, I'd like to ask, have you ever used AI to check and verify an issue or argument that a public affairs professional has discussed with you?
That's a good question. No, not directly. Mostly because I don't think I've actually had to. And what I mean by that is, the legislature, particularly Virginia's, we go so fast. We have 2 months where we do all of our lawmaking. You really have to lean on the committee structure to get things done. And in the areas where I'm an expert or that I prioritize, I kind of already know all the roadblocks and the who to ask and the how to verify without kind of going through that. And I can get a more kind of Virginia nuanced answer. I think like when you're talking, like the one thing, AI is this like globalized thing, right? And it's pulling in information from everywhere. But if I'm trying to run an education bill about, let's say testing, I did a testing bill last year. I'm going to actually find the answer quicker by just talking to the lobbyist who's been here 20 years and knows the ins and outs of the testing process than I am verifying it through AI. I'm going to get a better, more nuanced answer because they're just going to kind of know where the bodies are buried and stuff like that. So oftentimes it just ends up being these kind of more nuanced answers than AI can kind of effectively give me credit for. I think that's more effective if you're thinking about like this broad, like, hey, we're talking about the philosophical differences between like these two healthcare solutions, and someone's giving me an answer and you can run it. But a lot of the times in the legislature, that's not. By the time it gets to us and we're in committee or we're on the floor voting, it's actually not about that at that point. So yeah, I have not. I've not done that.
That makes sense. Also, just talking about the importance of having like real on the ground subject matter experts, right? Of being able to go to them pretty darn quickly.
Well, and I think that's one of the places where, to go back to my previous answer about the way not to use it, because it's so funny, right? Like legislatures are these creatures where you have so much like baked in knowledge in all these random weird places. And if you don't know who knows where that knowledge is, you're just going to end up running right into a brick wall. You're going to think you have this brilliant idea, and then some legislator is going to be like, I was around 8 years ago when they tried that. It's not a good idea. Here's why, right? Or some lobbyist is just going to like totally blindside you and get your bill killed, and it's because you didn't realize how they interact with this other person, and it becomes much more of a people accounting for people thing than it does accounting for ideas thing.
Right. Interesting. There's always one of those where if you're ever watching the news and I think like, man, why don't they do blank, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, there's probably 10,000 different reasons on why that hasn't happened, right? So
yeah, there's this really powerful legislator who really cares a lot about it, and you're going to do it over a dead body.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we got a great question here from Nathan. This is one of those where it's like, legislators are people too. So like, question here on what are your thoughts on AI-powered note-taking during meetings with either constituents or other legislators, like Applied Note or other similar gadgets and software?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it. I I very rarely take notes when I'm talking to constituents.
Hmm.
Not because I don't want to remember what happened, but if staff is there, they'll do it. And then if they're not there, I'll kind of make notes when I'm done, just because I want to like give them my energy and time.
Right.
And so I think that's a great way to. I have not done that, and I should do that. That's actually a good idea for me, because I do think that's like it's a good use of. It's definitely a really good use of it because it's helping you do a thing when you want to make sure you're prioritizing like the kind of. You want them to make sure that they know you're listening.
Right. Right.
Actually, it's a really good idea. I'm going to steal it.
Yeah, I use it a lot, but often I usually start my meetings with like 5 minutes of personal talk, and it's great watching that end up in the summary of like like Patrick's is like an action item. It's like work on short game, stuff like that, which is great. I'm curious about like you talked a good bit about like sending messages out to your constituents and responding to constituent messages. Do you ever take in the idea that maybe some of these constituent messages were written by AI, and how does that impact the way that you read it and think about it?
Yeah, I mean, as long as politics has been politics, you've had the form letter, right, that gets sent to you by constituents about issues they care about. I mean, go back to like abolitionist petitions in the 1840s, right? And I think that's like a part of politics, and it's a good way for citizens to get involved. I kind of do assume that a lot of those at this point are at least the first draft is AI, which is I think totally fine. I don't have a problem with that. I am of the viewpoint that if a constituent cared enough to email me about something, that's valuable unto itself. So I don't really have a lot of heartburn about how they do it. I think like just doing it is important and is worthy of respect. So yeah, I mean, I assume like all things AI has infiltrated into the email communication but hey, you spent the time to reach out to me. That's cool. It's kind of how I feel about it.
That's great.
And I actually think like I have the more responsibility in that. I personally think that like, unlike a business to business or maybe a teacher to teacher email, right? Like I actually feel like I have more responsibility in this relationship because you have entrusted in me, like even if you didn't vote for me, right? Like the community entrusted in me a responsibility to represent them, right? So it's more incumbent on me to show respect and to take the time to respond in a thoughtful way than it is on them who, maybe they're upset or they're concerned or,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's a really nice approach. I don't know, my heart got a little warm there. When you're drafting legislation, have you ever used AI to see how other states have addressed similar issues legislatively or analyzed why particular bills were or were not successful?
Yes. Not for the why they were or were not successsive, because I think that gets into the people business.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand the like the AI just can't tell you the like for example, I've been running a bill about housing supply that is like a mutt of 4 or 5 different states that like pulled from Utah, pulled from New York, it pulled from Montana, and in Utah a version of that bill passed, and in New York it didn't. And you could argue New York has a bigger housing crisis than Utah. But the reason it didn't pass in New York was down to the suburban politics of New York circa 2022. AI is not going to really be able to tell you that and really tell you like where the pain points were. But in terms of like what other states do, yes. Although I will say, I will put a little disclaimer on that I still think at the end of the day, if you want to best know the lay of the land on an issue, it's still like think tanks that do better work. So like if I want to, I ran a bill on single staircase reform, and if I want to see how that's working in other states, I have AI'd on that, but I still think like the Pew Charitable Trust, which has been really into housing supply issues, they have great primers and great rundowns of single staircase that's a lot better, a lot more, it's got just better quality. So I still think AI comes up short with like your kind of think tanks that care a lot about policy issues, and they're able to kind of take the research of people and create reports that are more meaningful than AI. But I know I 100% do though, because I think it's a good starting point, especially on issues where I'm not an expert, right? So like if we're talking about education, elections, housing, energy, these are things that I'm constantly playing in and kind of constantly have my pulse on what other states are doing. But if I'm running a bill on, I did 2 years ago, data privacy, ironically, using AI to figure out what other states were doing was a good starting point to then go forward.
Right. I guess in that sense, like replacing a Google search, right? Kind of
it kind of is. And I think like finding who the experts are, AI can be good for that too, if you're in an area that you don't know a lot about. For
sure. We did get a question, and I think is an educational or something related to education. Do you see a role in AI in state summative testing?
Yes, that's a great question. Yes is the answer. I've got a bajillion opinions about state testing, and we could be here for a full day hearing my very nuanced version of, and I carried a bill on testing in Virginia last year, and we have a big testing contract coming up in Virginia for testing next year. That's going to be really important. It's a really important contract. And the next gubernatorial administration is going to be responsible for it. And I think one of the things that we need to figure out, because I am a huge proponent, I'm from New York originally, the New York Regents testing has a lot of writing on it. And one of the reasons why a lot of states don't have writing on their tests is the expense of grading it. New York brings teachers in, teachers grade all the essays, right? And that's expensive. You got to pay for meals, you got to pay for their time. And a lot of states don't do that. And this is a potential way to help triage for that. You're going to have to still have eyeballs on it, of course. But I do think like if done well, that could 100% play a role in helping us have better tests that are graded more effectively and with less bias. I think that is a potential really good use of AI. I think the question will be, how do we referee it? And we'll have to have kind of appeals processes, right? Or we'll have to have some kind of way of getting human eyes on it. But like, I actually like testing is like this. Now I am on a slight rant. I'll stop though in 2 seconds. The problem with testing is that it's 100% necessary in some capacity, and it's the least sexy thing to spend money on. Like, what politician goes home and says, I got $100 million to test your kids in high school, right? It's really hard to build a political coalition around spending on it, even though it is, I would argue, one of the most vital components to a good public education system. And this maybe helps solve for that a little bit. Great.
Interesting. I love learning new stuff about policy on these things. Usually we're talking about government affairs, or we're talking about like messaging and all that kind of fun stuff. All right. Well, do you have any, we're closing in on time here. Do you have any final thoughts for folks on the call here on, just any last takeaways on how you're thinking about AI, or any calls to action for anybody else here?
Yeah. I mean, I just think, I've already said it, but I think it's the key point. Like, I think the frictionlessness of AI is the thing that people have to account for. It doesn't make it good. It doesn't make it bad. Although in some ways it makes it good, and in some ways it makes it bad. But I think if you're not accounting for that, you're really missing the boat. I mean, I'm a firm believer in incentive structure. I'm a Madisonian Federalist 51 kind of guy. You set the system up to pit interest against interest, and if the incentive structure is right, your government will work well, or your classroom will work well, your school system will work well. And I think if you're not taking into account how that frictionlessness incentivizes people in these different spheres, you're going to get it wrong. And I think that's really the thing that we need to figure out. It needs to be included in the conversation when we're figuring out how to use it in all these places, because the example of the state employee who can use it to just do more work, to get more things done, to get the project built faster. That's great frictionlessness. Like that's awesome, because we know that the state's not going to hire but so many more workers. But if they can use this to help plow through some of the choke points, that's good. If we're just like unleashing kids on laptops and saying go, and then the frictionlessness leads to them just cheating, well, we haven't done our job. So I think figuring that out is the key to a lot of it. Not everything, not the privacy stuff, and not some of the consumer protection stuff maybe, but I think if that's not being taken into account, we're just we'll get it wrong, or we'll make mistakes. I think that's where legislators are going to make mistakes. It's frictionlessness. They just decide to use it for a whole bunch of things, and then all of a sudden they send out this really weird email to people, and people get all mad, and they got a political crisis on their hands.
Right. Also, the first time we've used the term Madisonian on these webinars, and I'm so excited that that's a first. So,
I was going to put them in the background and I didn't. A Richmond museum had a statue of Madison and Jefferson, and they're like paper mache statues that are life size, and they're like, "Do you want them?" Because they were like emptying out their space during COVID, and so I have them here in my room. You can't see it because I got another screen, but so I've got Jefferson here with a Henrico flag, and I got Madison wearing a JMU college, James Madison University hat, just hanging out in my room.
So this whole time, Thomas Jefferson has actually been behind you.
He's like right here.
That's great. Well, I'm in this blue void. It's all just void back here. So that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Senator, for joining us. This has been an incredibly enlightening conversation. Learned a whole lot about how y'all are approaching AI, and share a lot of your thoughts on how there's a lot of great stuff that we can do going forward. So thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great conversation. Had fun.
Thank you. If you are still in here on the right-hand side on the screen, over on the doc side, feel free to join in our AI Inner Circle to talk a little bit more with some other public affairs folks on how they're using AI, and also join Wonk Nation, which is our Slack community, which I'll be posting some follow-ups from our past couple webinars, all on how state folks are using AI. Thank you all so much for joining us. I had a blast over these past couple of weeks. And if you're going to be at NCSL next week, come stop by our booth and come to our party and all that kind of fun stuff. I'd love to see you there.